Thanks a lot, Charlie. There's not much good to say about the game we just watched, a 7-0 loss to the New York Rangers with an absolutely decimated roster for the Nashville Predators. So instead of a usual statistics-based one big stat, I want to do something a little different, and I ask you to bear with me. Tonight, I am, and maybe indirectly, going to be the topic of this episode's one big stat. Now, before we start, I want to say a couple of things. First off, please forgive me if I do a little bit more reading from my script than usual. This topic is pretty important to me, and I want to make sure I get it right. And second, I promise it's not just me telling a story about myself. There's a point to all of it. So without further ado, let's get started. Last week, after the Predators had defeated the Red Wings, I got to speak with several Nashville Predators in the locker room, just like I normally do, but one of them stuck out to me more than most. I was standing there, microphone in hand, talking to Kiefer Sherwood, and something kept just sticking in my head. What was it about Kiefer Sherwood that seemed different to me? I mean, I've had the chance to talk to 30, 40 NHL players so far in my career, but something was different about Kiefer Sherwood, and it stuck with me all night long. But then on the way home, I remembered something that I'd learned about him earlier this season when he debuted, and everything started to click. Kiefer Sherwood is half Japanese. And outside of his hair being much better than mine, being a few inches taller, and much better at pretty much everything sports related, I was struck with a feeling that I had never had in nearly 4 years of covering the NHL. I was talking to a player that looked just like me. My dad, as well as my uncle, were both born in Japan and placed in an orphanage very early in their lives, and my grandparents adopted them. My grandparents at the time were stationed in Japan as part of the U.S. Navy, and after a short stint in the Pacific and a couple other places, they eventually moved back to West Tennessee, where all of my family comes from and where my dad grew up. Now, I'll be honest with you. Yes, technically I am a minority, but I feel pretty privileged when I say I've never once faced any prejudice because of it. And yes, part of it is because a lot of people just look at me with a slightly confused look on their face and go, what are you? Because they don't know what my ethnicity is, but I can't say that once in my life have I been held back for something because of it. But I also know that I am very lucky to be able to say something like that. So why am I telling you this story? Of course, I still have to give you my one big stat for the night, and tonight's one big stat is 31. 31 is the number of Asian American players who have ever played an NHL game. From Larry Kwong, who was the very first and deserves to be in the NHL Hall of Fame, all the way to Kiefer Sherwood, there are more teams currently in the NHL than players who look like me that have ever played a game in the NHL. Of course, Paul Kariya holds a special place in most hockey fans' heart, of course, but it's always been a dream of mine to meet him for the very reason I've been talking about tonight. Again, you might be wondering, why am I telling this story? Representation matters. Not just to future generations or marginalized groups, but even a 36-year-old beat writer with 2 kids who have lived a pretty lucky life. There's nothing I can say to explain what it meant to me when I got to speak to Kiefer Sherwood that night, nor when I talked to him after practice the next day about this very topic. Part of it, I guess, is hope. Hope that one day that number will be much larger than 31. And yes, I don't harbor any illusions of, well, if Sherwood can be in the NHL, so could I. But until that moment, it was the first time in 36 years that I got to see a professional sports player on my favorite team whose background was just like mine. And everybody should get to experience that feeling. Everyone, without exception. Again, I'm incredibly lucky that I get to speak to these guys after every home game, but even the fans in the stands can feel a kinship with the greatest sport on earth if there's a player out on the ice that reflects who they are as a person. Now, I'm not going to say anything more about James Reimer and the Sharks or any of the similar events that have happened this season. If you're watching this, chances are you already know my thoughts on it. But situations like that are why things like this matter. There are half Japanese hockey fans. There are female hockey fans. There are fans of hockey who are veterans. There are gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered, and other queer hockey fans out there. And every single one of them deserves to feel the way I felt standing in that locker room that night. Because sports has done one thing since they were invented, and that's to bring people together around a common interest. If you disagree with me on this, well, there's nothing I can do about it. But it's my hope that there are far more of you that agree with me than not. I want to close this out by saying something directly to you, Renegades. Since day one of working with Charlie, I have felt welcome and supported. Same with anyone who has worked with him. Same with the staff at On the Forecheck. I've been welcomed into the Predators press corps despite being a hockey writer with no formal journalism training. I want you all to live your lives to help others feel the same way. Reach out to somebody and welcome them to the game of hockey. Show them the love and passion that you have for this game and allow them to experience it too. I don't care what color, orientation, or other status they may identify as, because we're all human beings. Renegades, I challenge you to be welcoming to all of those people who cross your path, because you never know when something simple like a routine post-game interview could turn into something that means so much to a person, and in that case, it was me. Hockey has been the reason I've met so many wonderful people in my life. Hockey has been a place where I felt welcome in some of the darkest times of my life. Back in 2020, when I was suffering from pretty severe depression, hockey was the lifeline that I could hold on to because I loved the sport, but more than that, I loved the people, and it was a loving community that welcomed me in. And every single person in this world deserves the same feeling. So thank you all, Renegades, for listening to this. It's easy to feel anger, disappointment, or many other negative emotions at the state of the NHL right now, but there is always room for love, happiness, and inclusion, no matter what happens on the ice. Hockey brings people together, and I challenge you, Renegades, to be part of that positive force that welcomes people in without telling them that they don't belong. Because even though the NHL says it and probably doesn't mean it, hockey truly is for everyone, and I refuse to believe otherwise. And that's tonight's One Big Stat. Charlie?